Hey, in this video I want to have a chat about the state of Psytrance in 2024. And yeah, at the risk of this sounding like a rant from a, I don't know, middle-aged man, I've just been wondering how we got to where I remember Psytrance starting from, sort of in the mid-90s, to today, where I think, with few exceptions, a lot of the music that's coming out is super formulaic, predictable, and it just feels like it's been in a loop for the better part of 10, maybe even 15 years. So why do I feel entitled to talk about this, or why do I think it's important? Well, I guess first off, I'm a musician, so I probably listen to music also more from a production point of view. I released the Psytrance album myself, I think it was 2007, under the artist name Reliant. But more important than that, I think it's because I was really privileged to be part of the Psytrance scene when it was just coming up, like mid-90s in Ibiza. And I was surrounded by a lot of really great DJs and live acts that were living there at the time. So I got to listen to a lot of amazing music, and it's just really, what's the right word? It makes me very curious. I have a very big question mark over my head, knowing the origins, and I'm going to play you some tracks from then, sort of the first couple of years, just so you get an idea of how varied the music landscape was, how unique so many of the acts sounded to what I hear today. And as a musician, I'm like, but man, we have so many options, right? Like, why are so many acts these days feeling compelled to be so formulaic about this? So we're going to listen to a couple of tracks that I think are really indicative of, you know, how original and varied and experimental Psytrance music was in the early days.
So all of these tracks are pre-2000, and yes, some of them will sound, I guess, not as well produced as we're used to these days. You may have to hear past a couple of kicks that don't sound quite as you would imagine them, but what I think is so interesting about these tracks is how varied they are in their rhythm elements, their groove, their basses, the overall vibe of the track. Like, there's a huge spectrum here. So let's not talk about it, let's rather dive in. And the first track I've picked is Spawn, which is a side project of Simon Posford. I actually thought this was much later in the trance journey because it's really advanced, and actually this is one of the ones that has an incredible mix. Let's have a listen. All right, so I want to skip into a part where I think it's super interesting. I mean, the whole track is brilliant. Of course, I'll share this list in the comment of this video, but let me skip you to a part where I think this track just gets super interesting. I have such good memories dancing to this track in Ibiza, and honestly, like, I don't know anyone that can mix a bass on a kick as clean as this. It's unbelievable. And of course, it's much easier to mix kick and bass if there's never a bass happening on the kick, but this track shows how interesting that can be. And this next track here is also just a masterpiece. It's the, I guess, kick version, so the version with a kick of an extreme track. I realized when I made this list, there's a lot of extreme on here. And again, this one just sounds incredible considering the time it's from. Let's have a listen. Original drums that I've actually heard in electronic music are in this track. Super cool. So this track is from 96. The track before was from 98. Let's listen to some Juno Reactor, Conga Fury. So I'm skipping through these tracks so this video doesn't become 35 minutes. That track right now, Conga Fury, was 96. This is 97, Sandman. The problem with playing Sandman, I remember back in the day, is you never knew what to play afterwards because like nothing fit. It just was that far out. This is like a 12-minute journey, and the whole thing, it just keeps shifting up on you and changing. And I think I'm starting to see a pattern. One of the things I really appreciate about these tracks is the bass lines are all over the place. They're not like the typical bass lines that are either up bass or a third bass or like so a triplet bass or a 16th bass. Another amazing track, Kicking Test from The Antidote from 96. So let's do just a couple more because there are so many on this list are amazing. Shiva Chandra, Daniel, a really super nice guy that I know from back in the Hamburg days. Again, his music, if you played it at a party, the problem was what the hell do you play afterwards? Because it was so unique. Yeah. super interesting groove feel. I'm going to skip past this hallucinant track. It's amazing, but let's listen to Growling Mad Scientist track made by Rikdam and Banzi. Rikdam, yeah, amazing, amazing stuff. I think they influenced the way the scene developed very heavily because their music obviously just really gets parties going. And this is the early stuff where you can already hear their brilliance. Again, just so original, so cool. I can imagine Rikdam's maybe horrified that I picked such an early release. You know, the quality of their productions these days, or his productions now, is you know, it's way louder and more present and everything. But this is from their first album, and it's super original and super driving and really, really cool. I mean, there's a couple of other ones in here. Atmos obviously had a massive impact. Dritte Raum, really cool stuff. Some more extreme, some super early tracks from Transwave, Astral Projection. Total Eclipse. So I'll share the list so that you can have a listen for yourself, and you know, some of you that may know these tracks from back in the day, maybe a nice flashback. Some of you that have never heard some of these, perhaps it may be inspiring and interesting to hear the roots. And I think if you listen past the production quality, which is not, you know, how you expect it these days, but the musical ideas are so varied and so interesting and so different and broad. And that's what I love about this. Like, I remember going to parties in this age, and it's like, what, you know, the development of someone's set would be a huge journey, and when someone new came on, the sound could shift completely, and it was just like you were in a different sonic world. And I haven't heard that, or I haven't experienced that in a trance party in many, many years. So yeah, that was my little flashback journey, just to share some of the tracks that I felt really are like, wow, these are really showing a broad scope of where this music started.
So I hope that having listened to these old school tracks, you also maybe have more of an impression, especially if you're someone that's come to the Psytrance scene maybe a little bit later, of where we're coming from. And there's so many other possibilities, speaking as a musician, that we can explore. And I wanted to put some of those in these examples because it just makes for a very different vibe and energy on the dance floor. And I know that in Brazil and Ozora and the big parties in Southern Europe and stuff, they're still like packed and booming. But very often when I see smaller parties, videos over on some social media channel, the floors look kind of empty and kind of not happening. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people I think are probably quite happy to listen to something that's a bit more experimental and maybe a bit more explorative. Why am I making this video? What's the point, right? I think as being someone that was there early on, my appeal would be to producers, to musicians, to just dare to be a bit more explorative and to stay away a bit more from the tried and tested and proven stuff. And I fully understand that if you're, you know, being put on a dance floor at a certain peak time and you have to play something and it's like the easiest and expected thing to play the stuff that has worked for the last 10 years. But if musicians and producers keep doing that all the time, in my opinion, eventually the scene devolves into something where it's just an echo of the original intention, which in my opinion was very psychedelic and explorative in nature, and it was all about the options that are out in the field and some manifesting them in music. I love this music and where it started and where it would take me and people, my friends back in the day, and you know, what's possible to experience through this music. But if the music is fully predictable and expected and just, you know exactly what's coming because you've heard it 1,000 times before, it loses its magic a bit. So share your thoughts below if you like, and yeah, have a good one.